Welcome to episode 8 of the Free Spirit Academy podcast with author and clinical nutritionist Natalia Rose. Free Spirit Academy is about you being fully you. My name is Randy Moss, and I'm an eating psychology coach and Kundalini yoga teacher, bringing you conversations about freedom from rigid diets, painful body image, and never-ending cycles of self-help and self-improvement. This is about honoring our own bodies and our purest self-expression. Welcome to the podcast. Interesting conversation with a client recently about how one of the recent episodes, probably a couple of them actually, on Detox and colonics actually felt triggering to her. And she said she had this sort of freaked out, knee-jerk reaction like, oh my God, maybe that's something I need to be doing. And because of all the work that we've been doing together, she was able to step back and see that that knee-jerk reaction felt really fearful. So we talked about the difference between this sort of like racy, high, excited thing, like when you find the new diet and you're like, oh my God, this is it. And it could be about food or health or whatever, but it's this feeling of like, this is it. This is the one thing and I finally found it and my whole life is going to change, versus a calm feeling of just being curious and something feeling right and your body feeling open to something new. And this distinction between these sort of two reactions when deciding whether or not to take a next step in making a change is something that I really had to learn by trial and error. It's definitely something I went through myself and still a tool I use. And I do my best never to make a decision, no matter how logically right it sounds, if I feel like my desire is rooted in fear. Like if I don't do this thing, then oh my God, what will happen? And I healed years of disordered eating by learning to follow intuition and true joy, and it's joy that I follow in what I share here. So if what you hear in any of these episodes doesn't leave you with a sense of ease and joy or just a gentle sort of perked up curiosity, then just leave it. And what's even more likely is that you'll find a gem or a handful of gems within an episode, and I encourage you to take what resonates and just leave the rest behind. So today we're talking with somebody I've mentioned probably on every other episode so far, Natalia Rose. You can find most of her books on the diet shelf, but they are truly so much more than diet books. They're life changers, not just body changers. And I'm not saying life changers because they're the perfect weight loss cure. I'm not saying they're not either. I'm just saying that they changed the way I felt in my body and massively impacted the way that I looked at the world. And while my own experience and intuition have led me in directions that might look a little bit different than the cookie cutter approach that I tried to turn her books into in the beginning, I'm forever grateful for the shift in perspective that she offered me. So today we'll talk about how trying to take diet just as diet can easily turn into disorder, how Natalia's life radically changed when she began cleansing her body, and how that made her, and she quote says, see that everything I'd ever learned about food and body was untrue. We talk about the point before this where she was so miserable she was considering suicide, the ridicule she faced in her personal life when she quit living in a traditional way, how she works with women wanting to cleanse their bodies and heal and feel vibrantly well, but struggle with a history of disordered eating, how detoxification is truly about authenticity and getting to be totally yourself in your body, how bulimia can be connected with a lack of boundaries and the ability to communicate, and how the body speaks in the language of pleasure and pain and how to follow that. I hope you enjoy this episode with Natalia. So what I want to talk with you about today is so far beyond weight loss. But if we start with my own experience, ironically, that is how I found your work. It was probably, over 10 years ago that I found the raw food detox diet when I was working at a bookstore. And it was like, and I've mentioned this in other podcasts, it was like electric in my hands. And I had no idea why. I knew this book was for me. And I just figured like, okay, well, this is going to be it, that feeling when it's like, this is going to be the diet that's going to save my life and I'm going to lose all the weight. But I started reading it, and this one phrase popped out at me, and it was such a light bulb, and you can never go back from these moments. And it was the waste equals weight, or weight equals waste. So can you, first of all, explain this concept to us? What is waste in the body, and how does it not only equal weight, but other things as well?
Okay, Randy, that's an amazing question. And let's start with what the waste is, as you asked. The waste is the accumulation of substances that the body could not completely eliminate. So it basically hangs on, it accumulates. It's an accumulation of matter that has entered the body and it hasn't left, basically. But here's what happens. While that matter is in the body, it's fermenting, it's putrefying. So in that waste, and this is going to sound pretty intense, but in that waste is growing these pathogens. It's the gas and the excretion that the pathogens are developing themselves. So they're like little beings that have to defecate and proliferate, and so it's the waste plus the pathogenic overgrowth that's growing within the waste. So it's pretty noxious, and it's pretty horrendous to think about it, but it's basically makes us very septic, and that noxious waste expands. So gas expands. So it makes us appear, larger. So it's expanding our cells and tissues. It's making them bigger, and it's inflammatory. So it's also making it bigger because it's inflammatory. So you have this kind of a waste accumulation plus allergic reaction basically occurring in the body. And the body basically saying, no, why are you doing this to me? I want to live and move and breathe and be flexible and high vibration. But it's basically the death cycle taking place in the body. And it's causing the body to calcify and all these things. So while it's doing that, because that space in the body is now taken up by waste and it's proliferating pathogens, the blood is now getting contaminated. The blood is feeding the organs. The organs are getting tired. The organs are trying to break down and eliminate waste as well. So you've got the liver, the kidneys, the lungs, the skin, all trying to manage the overload of this waste accumulation, which never stops. It's not like anybody, it's accumulating, and then it's like compounding interest, but in the sort of negative terminology rather than in like happy banking terminology. It's like a compounding problem. So the onslaught doesn't stop. It's exacerbating the whole system, and the organs are getting tired. So if the organs are getting tired and the organs are trying to be part of, they're basically filters. And so the lungs, kidney, liver, skin, they're all trying to filter out so that the body will stay clean. Their aim is to keep the body clean. So they're doing their darndest to get rid of all this stuff. But if they get weaker because the blood isn't clean and because the system is at large getting overloaded with these substances that were never intended to weigh the human body down, then they can't actually do their job. So it's like it's a problem on multiple levels. That if once that original cause is identified, that it's the waste accumulation, and that can be addressed, then suddenly the weight issue is addressed.
So it's obviously so much more than just the calories in, calories out thing that people are used to.
Oh yeah. In fact, and with calories in, calories out, one important thing to recognize that most people don't know is that a unit of energy can be a unit of contributory energy that actually gives life to the body, or it can be a unit of energy that is life depleting to the body. So when you drink a highly caloric, say soda or grain food or some sort of flesh food with hormones and antibiotics and drink a glass of milk, that's all anti-energetic. So you might be clocking your calories saying, oh, but I have a perfect diet, perfectly balanced. I've got my dairy, my meat, my carbs, my this, my that. And I clock it in at 2,000 calories a day. And, a whoopee for me, I'm doing everything just as the USDA has told me to. But it's all anti-energetic. So it's basically killing you. It's draining you of your life force.
So practically what could that look like for somebody day to day? Because let's say somebody they know about this whole detox buzzword and they're like, you know what, I don't want to worry about the weight loss thing anymore. I don't really care about my weight. So what if waste is accumulating and there's weight on my body? But how does that impact somebody's day to day experience?
Okay, just help me a little bit more to get what you're asking.
In general, I'm wondering, like for somebody who's fairly comfortable in their skin, like they don't want to worry about the diet thing. Maybe they've gone up and down on the scale for so long and they're like, you know what? I want to just love my body as it is. So fine, there's waste in my body and I'm carrying extra weight, but it's so much more than that, right? Because we wake up and we feel terrible and we have all sorts of symptoms. So like, how is it impacting the sort of practical experience in the body?
Okay. I think I understand. So the waste matter, the body is a hologram. So everything that occurs on a cellular level is going to occur on an emotional level, a mental level, a spiritual level, sexual level. It's all wherever anything is happening, as above, so below. Any level that's implicated and disgruntled or sort of out of balance is going to affect all the other fields of the body. So a physical body that is heavy laden, burdened with accumulated waste is going to lack its buzz, its frequency, its joie de vivre. We're meant to be, by design, a clean celled body is meant to be a conduit of electromagnetic energy. That's what life force is. That's what we call primal power, the primal fire, chi, prana. Those are all synonymous. And when the body's burdened with waste and its sort of the compounding aspects of it, it's going to make us feel sort of inured to what's really happening in life. We're going to feel kind of numbed, and that's why people they might even be. You can be very thin and still have huge amounts of waste accumulation. So and that's a whole other story, but we can talk about it another time if you want to. But what's important to understand is that the physiology is going to reflect the emotional state of being. We should feel like we're buzzing all the time. If we're conducting electromagnetic energy, we should really just be inspired and creative and operating from an open heart center. So they really does. The waste in the body will really implicate the other fields dramatically.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my experience was that for so long, I wanted it to be just a diet, even though I felt like I knew there was so much more. I was trying to be like, okay, well, once my body looks perfect, then I can worry about all this other stuff. And it was just this on the wagon, off the wagon, constantly beating myself up for not being perfect enough. And like anything, even something as beautiful as removing the waste and the obstruction from the body can be turned into disorder. Which is certainly what I did for so many years. And finally, I had to be like, you know what, this isn't working. This tiny focus on your weight is overtaking your whole life. This tiny focus on needing to be perfect, needing to look a certain way, it's just not working. And so I let it all go. I let it all go for a while, which in hindsight, in a way, it's crazy. Like, I was letting the waste accumulate in my body and but for the state that I was in, it was the only thing that worked. So I let it all go for a while. And physically, I really started to deteriorate. So mentally, it was amazing. Mentally, I was like, wow, I see that I can love myself and I can love my body, even if I am not trying to be perfect or trying to look like I'm on the cover of a magazine. However, over the course of weeks and months, all of the symptoms that I dealt with pre-cleansing came back. So I was getting depressed again and, weight was coming on and I was dealing with that, but my mind just got foggy and my body just felt heavy. And I started developing really painful joints and just the way that I was engaging with the world was not the same. It was like there was this block between me and just being myself. And I think, like you said, it sort of numbs you when we have this waste sort of, sitting in our bodies, infiltrating our cells. We can't just be ourselves. And it's the natural state of humans, right? To be inspired and to be creative and to have this buzz of life force. But I don't think people realize that that's our natural state. And so they're just like, using stimulants and trying to get it in some sort of mirrored way. But the real deal is what's natural to us. So that's what brought me back, I think, is the point that I'm trying to get to, is that I missed this lightness, this naturalness of just being myself, without all of this blockage and accumulation in the way. So thank you for saying that, for expanding about how much bigger this is than just the way we look. When did you make that connection for yourself? So how did you get into this work? And when did you see like, oh my gosh, this is going to give me so much more than just a certain size?
First of all, that's a great experiment. And I enjoyed hearing about what you just explained. It's so important to physically, viscerally experience that too, because nobody can tell you. You really have to understand it for yourself and feel it for yourself. For me, it happened. Well, I had a very tough time between sort of 13 and 21. And that was when I went to boarding school at 13. I left California, and my mother was very healthy. We basically grew up going to health food stores and eating, like we would have wheatgrass shots. My mother would give us enemas. Like it was the whole 9 yards. She lived for a time on Bernard Jensen's health ranch in the 60s. So she had a body slant board. She was in many ways my first teacher. And so when I went to boarding school in the deep south, well, not the deep south, in Virginia, but in Southern Virginia, the food was basically deep south food. And I went from never even thinking about my body, because I was just this sort of like, very lightweight little tween. And but being raised in LA, very image conscious, because I was raised in the entertainment business, and my mother loved to shop in Beverly Hills, and so I basically grew up on Rodeo Drive. So there was a sense of, I never really thought about my body, but I knew how important clothes were to this culture, and looks and image and all this stuff. So when I went to Virginia and I started to eat fritters and like just all this Southern food, I very rapidly, it kind of coincided with puberty. So it was a mess within a very short time. I put on my freshman 15 when I was a freshman in high school, rather than in college, like most people, as the term is meant to reflect. So I was in a panic when I was ready to go home for Christmas holidays, and I couldn't get my jeans on. And suddenly it dawned on me that like I was going to be such a disappointment to my family. And sort of, it was sort of in that moment that my next 7 years just crystallized, and it became this battle with my body, because once you get into that headspace and you start playing around with weight loss tricks and things, your body's, it just never goes back to where it was when you were that innocent kid who would just eat when they were hungry and respond to food naturally. So I threw it all out of whack. I was taking diet pills, and I was anorexic. I went to France the following year, and of all places to be anorexic in Provence. But it was a madness. I mean, just the whole thing just took me over, and years of bulimia, anything and everything. And then I started to study everything and get my hands on, but it was all the textbook nutrition, and none of it really made sense. And by the time I was 21-ish, I was virtually suicidal. I couldn't believe that this mindset was how I was going to have to go through my life. And I thought, this is how I feel at 21. What's it going to be like when I'm 35 and I've had children? Like, right. Then, what does the future hold? It's going to be all, it basically felt like a prison sentence. And I couldn't see beyond you mentioned the other aspects, the other fields that it impacts upon. Even though those other fields were a mess, I was, emotionally crippled on many levels, and mostly because of this. And I was physically sick all the time. So I had chronic bronchitis, chronic bladder infections. I had acne, not to mention the, excess weight and the cellulite, and, I brain fog. The way I explain it is that basically anything that could befall modern woman basically befell me. I was a whole composite of modern symptoms. And I was so miserable. And even though my life on paper was amazing, inside I was just like thinking, how am I going to cope with this? And it was about a year or two later that I found Gil Jacobs, who's a mutual teacher of ours. And the way I like to put it is I basically attached myself to him like Velcro until I learned everything I could possibly learn from him. Because within a matter of weeks, my my whole state of being, state of body, state of mind changed completely, full 180. And in that short amount of time, even though that was just the beginning of the changes that were going to come, that's when I knew I was like, my life was going to be good. I saw the light at the end of the tunnel. It was just like, okay, actually, I've got the answer. Everything's going to be fine. But it turned the whole paradigm of our modern culture on its head. It basically meant that everything I'd ever learned about food in the body was untrue. And so it was, despite the fact that I had this wonderful career and it was in many ways, all this knowledge was met with so much enthusiasm. In my personal life, I was met with a huge amount of ridicule. So it was, turning it all on its head, made it impossible to follow tradition. I had children fairly young at 25 and 28 and at 25 and 27. And so basically I had to contend soon after, within a year or two of taking all this information in, with my firstborn, I was having to contend with doctors, with other authorities, with schools. And I had to, stand on my own 2 feet because no one was there to support me. No one was saying, oh yeah, I believe this too. It was, this woman is a little bit off her rocker and maybe we should send child services, which they did, by the way.
Really?
Yeah. I got a visit from child services. And it was about the way I was feeding my daughter. Meanwhile, the one thing, and I highly recommend this, that I did, and I just intuitively knew to do this back then, was I had a mainstream doctor. So basically, even though I wasn't vaccinating my daughter, back in 2000, when I had my firstborn, who's now 17, even though I wasn't vaccinating, I wasn't doing things, according to tradition, my doctor was, he was fairly open-minded. He was kind of like cautiously optimistic, but he was cool. And he saw that this child was thriving. Like he was bright and energetic and growing at all the perfect rates. And it was, she was off the charts in the best ways, not the literal ways, I suppose, but she was just beaming. And when they did this horrible thing coming to my home and I basically just said, you know what, you can just call my very mainstream doctor, on Park Avenue, and he'll set you straight. And he did, and it was never a problem after that. But people get very funny, and a lot of this is having to, when you really accept what occurs in the body when you either put the traditional things in and follow the traditional route and get sick versus healing the body through these less traditional means, you really have to own it for yourself and be ready to stand up for what you believe to be true for yourself and not be bullied and not cow to the culture.
Yeah, you really do. You have to be so bold and so grounded, because sometimes I wish that I could just take somebody for a minute and be like, okay, this is what it feels like to be in my body. How does that compare to the experience that you're having? Because I think that people just don't realize. They just assume that everybody is feeling the way that they're feeling. It's just normal to get sick. It's normal to need these medications. It's normal to age the way that we do. It's normal to cow to authority or our social circle when they're saying that we're doing something unusual. So it can be very hard when you're the only one that's experiencing what you're experiencing to expect other people to get that in any way.
It's so true. I've thought about that so many times. Like, I just think if I could just, have you feel what this feels like.
Yes.
And the thing is, it's so impossible, but it is radical. But the beauty of it is that it stands the test of life. And, over time, it didn't mean much when I was in my 20s doing this, but now that I'm in my mid 40s, having had 3 children, and it just gets better, and I'm completely asymptomatic. I've been asymptomatic for as long as I can remember. I don't even get so much as a headache, and people are popping pills and taking anxiety medications. And, the thing is, the beauty of it too, is when your tissues get clean and clear, you are more sensitized. So you do feel more, but you can manage your emotions so much better. So, things naturally come up in my life that are difficult and cause me to, take strain and feel pain. But I can go into that space and I can feel it, and I can take the strain, and I can I can even, take feeling a bit wonky sometimes, a little bit rattled, a little bit unnerved, even, life is intense. And if you're really living it, things are going to happen. If you've got a lot of people in your life, things are going to happen to them. You love them. They're going to feel what it can be very intense, as I said. But you don't need to pop an anxiety pill. You don't need to take an antidepressant. You actually can just be there. You can feel it. It can move through you, and then you move beyond it. And you know that nothing can really take you down.
Right. And that's just unheard of these days. We have a pill for everything. Like, to actually feel our feelings it's not normal. I love that this conversation is going towards what's normal versus what's natural. So if you had so many people around you, especially in the early years, opposing you the way that they did, I'm sure that over the years you've had people say, what you're doing is just an eating disorder. This whole cleansing, seemingly extreme way of living is just disordered eating. What do you say to that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So basically, the world is eating in disorder. They're eating in chaos. Chaos is disorder. So when one eats haphazardly, when, and all sorts of things that come from all sorts of places, that is disorder. That is disordered eating. And when someone makes an attempt to create some order, they're actually creating an environment in their body, creating the conditions for more intelligence, more vitality, all these things. You have to create first. I think the confusion that people have is they don't understand that ordered eating is not a disorder. That chaotic eating is disorder. So again, first of all, I honestly don't mind if people laugh at me and say I have eating disorder or whatever. I just I get to wake up as me.
Right.
But basically, yeah, it comes down to mostly if one appreciates for oneself that bringing order to their consumption is a great thing, not, especially the problem is, Randy, I think because so many people who come to this wind up coming to it after having been through eating disorders, they can even question themselves. Like,
sure.
I had to quiz myself extensively because here with the kind of background that I had for those years, I was very self-reflective and examined, what is my psyche behind this? Like, and it wasn't until because I was ready, willing, and able to accept if I was actually expressing an eating disorder through this, I was going to accept it, and I wasn't going to go and take it to the world and say this is the way to live. If it was, because I didn't need to do that. I don't need it. I don't need to do this work to have a roof over my head. I have no reason to quote sell something that isn't what I truly believe to be life generating and transformative in the most positive way for people. So I wouldn't do this if I didn't truly believe in it. And if I thought for a second that if I thought it for a second it was an eating disorder, I wouldn't be doing it. But there are people who have not healed emotionally that can take the same tools and because their heads are not quite, they haven't been reordered. They're still chaotic. They're still disordered. There's still a certain amount of insanity, which actually literally means an uncleanliness. And that's not in any way to be judgmental. It's just the fact that things are still sort of gnarled up in their minds because of childhood trauma and primal pain and all this stuff. So they can take something that is life generating and turn it into an eating disorder.
Oh, absolutely.
So really, it really comes down to the individual evaluating their own state of mind, their own the work they've done on themselves, and they might say, you know what? And this is also a very healthy stage, is to say, actually, I still have a fair amount of my eating disordered headspace that's using this format of eating and tissue cleansing to sort of keep that alive. And that consciousness is huge, because that it doesn't mean that down the road this person's not going to be able to have it all. Have it all meaning, you live the deep tissue cleansing lifestyle and you do it from a place of a clean, clear mind and ordered emotions, functional emotions, maybe a better way to put it. But it can be that a disordered person, any disordered person, is using these means. Yeah, I mean, I've seen that before. So it's not to say that people who are living this lifestyle are free of eating disorder. The move is to try to address that, see yourself clearly, look at your shadows, and go through all of that. It takes a lot of work. We live because the thing is with our world is that it's so chaotic that you can spend an hour or two with a great therapist and do the work on yourself, and you walk out into the world, and so much of it gets unraveled again because there you are bombarded with the same thing. It's very hard to kind of detangle or untangle your gnarly knot and then be able to keep on untangling it while you interface with the world. So it's hard work. I would say to anyone who's listening, don't beat yourself up if you find that you're kind of in between these worlds right now. But just keep being very attentive, very conscious, and don't turn a blind eye to where you might be projecting your old, eating disordered kind of habits onto the deep tissue cleansing lifestyle.
Right. Are there specific, I don't know how much you work with people anymore, but over the years, I know that you've worked one-on-one with women. Are there specific things that you've given them or mindset shifts that you've sort of led them into when you realize like, oh, this person is either battling with an eating disorder or sort of edging on an eating disorder, and they're not really going to get where they want to go if they keep going down this path? Are there certain things that you do with them?
There are a few. One of the biggest things is, okay, and this is a huge topic, but the mouth is like all the orifices. It's a place to exchange with the outside world. So whenever we take anything in, it's a very intimate experience. We're taking a substance from the outside world, whether we're breathing it through our nose, we're taking it through our mouth, or we're and sexually engaging. It's the same kind of intimacy. And so when people start to realize that they haven't had good boundaries in their life, they will tend to overeat, undereat, eat chaotically, use food abusively, in the same way that a lot of people use sex abusively. So the intimacy boundary is very important to recognize, and where their boundaries have been off, and the mouth orifice is also the vocal cavity. It's the place where we speak our truth. We speak our heart's truth through our mouth, and if we haven't been able to say what we believe, we haven't been able to speak our truth, as the saying goes, then we can also have big issues around food, either too much, too little, chaotic, abusive, etc. So one of the biggest things people do is figure out, whether they've where their unhealthy boundaries may have come from, and recognizing that intimacy is serious. Like if you're not going to have random sex, don't eat randomly. It's the same thing. And then to figure out what they've wanted to say, what they feel what they would like to say that they feel they can't say, or they can't be received by the people closest to them. And I believe that this is a big a part of bulimia, and it's been a very effective tool in healing bulimia, because when you can finally identify that, and even if you can't, that the same person you wanted to say something to your parents your whole life, but that they can't receive your truth. So the toilet can receive it, and not only receive it, but can flush it away as if it never happened again. So no wonder it's such a cathartic release for so many people to purge, because they can basically have a full on expression through the through the throat, out of the mouth. And sorry for the big illustration.
Yeah, but, no, it makes sense.
And they can actually flush it away. So I think as you said, there's no, we can kind of go into all sorts of territory today. So why not just, go big? But that's really what that's about. And if the person can identify what they've really been wanting to say, who they have been able to say it to, they don't have to go and say it to that person. They can just identify it and recognize, okay, so why wasn't this person able to receive this truth of mine? Because of their limitations. Okay, well, I can forgive somebody their limitations because I have limitations too. But then they have to start really speaking their truth writing their truth, singing their truth. Singing is a wonderful way to channel energy. If everyone were to have a couple things, like ground themselves, have a good hot bath with some essential oils, and sing before every meal, or even just sing before every meal, that would make a big difference. Get their vibration right. I've built a traditional drum recently, and sheepskin. I know the vegans out there won't like this, but it's sheep's that were going to be used for other things. And literally the sheepskin wrapped up just like it's a Native American drum. And every morning, before I do anything else, I go outside the garden and I beat the drum. And I just get the vibe right, and I connect with nature and beating the drum. Now, the voice, the sound, any kind of sound frequency that resonates with a person can be used, but the voice really to express, because then the chances of you doing something abusive to yourself will be so counterintuitive. It'll be so in a different realm than where you are that you won't be likely to do it.
Absolutely. That's a really interesting way that you ended that. Because I'm thinking for me, what was so big, because I was a binge eater for so many years and intermittent with bulimia. And so for me, there was a lot of expression that was just not happening. I was so afraid to be myself. And it's really because I didn't know who I was. Oh my gosh. And I want to connect this to so many things about like the intimacy with food. And I don't think people realize what an intimate act that is, because we're moving at such a fast pace and we're not connected to our bodies at all. And we're just sort of shoving things in. And if we don't know ourselves, we're not being ourselves. So we're afraid of ourselves. So we're shoving it in even more. And maybe or maybe not, it's coming up and out into the toilet. And you're so right about the singing thing and sort of getting, I would have thought that was really cheesy, even just a couple of years ago, I'll be completely honest. But then I got into Kundalini yoga and chanting mantra and singing mantra and getting into this rhythm and using your voice. And there's this flow of energy, and it connects you to a bigger part of yourself. And it's just, I'm so with you on that. That's amazing. Everything. Oh, there was something else I wanted to ask you, but I got so excited that I wanted to touch on several things. Oh, I was thinking about, we actually spoke, you probably don't remember this. It was just this brief thing many, many years ago. We spoke on the phone. I was really struggling with this lifestyle. It was very on and off. Like I would be on it for a while and I would feel lighter and I would feel more like myself, and I would be dropping weight, which was extraordinarily important to me at the time. And then I would go into binging, and it was very all or nothing, on the wagon, off the wagon, no subtlety, no nuance. And we spoke on the phone, and it's interesting. A lot of the things that you said to me, I didn't know, I didn't understand them for a very long time. And the one thing I always remember, and I didn't get it at the time, it was like you were speaking a different language to me. And then years later I got it. I was like, oh, that's what she was saying. I was talking about how when I try and be really perfect with this lifestyle, I just go crazy. But hey, if I can eat some M&Ms once in a while, then I do fine. And you were talking to me about the vibration of foods and foods being in separation consciousness, or having been created from separation consciousness versus unity consciousness. And I was basically like, lady, I don't know what you're talking about, but now I get it. So could you explain that perspective to us?
Oh, wow. Well, very good memory. Basically we're an interconnected network of life. And if we are going to be vibrating at the frequency of source, and that's where our power is, that's where the primal power is, that's where basically that visceral hum that I know a lot of people won't know I'm talking about, because until you live this lifestyle long enough, it's very hard to know what that means. But if you can imagine a hummingbird or a bumblebee, and you can see that vibration, you can kind of, even if you just kind of go, and you can feel that frequency of the hum, that's what our cells should feel like. That's what we should all vibrate at. And so when we're not connected to that, then we never get to feel that. We always feel kind of cut off, and we're looking, as you said earlier, very aptly, for stimulation outside of ourselves, because we know intuitively that we should feel something, and we should feel a lot. Mm-hmm. So then we drink the coffee and have the alcohol and smoke the cigarettes and have the white flour and the white sugar and the animal meats and all this stuff. And it's hugely stimulating for that moment. But then, of course, it has that big drop off at the end. But so if we're if we're consuming food that's made in separation consciousness by, the the abattoirs of separation consciousness, and the packaged food in the factories, and the metals that are touching it, and the factory workers' mindsets and all of that, then we're basically taking in something that takes us even further away from that. And I'm not sure if I'm saying it in the way, because I don't exactly remember how we discussed it, but if you want to have more power, if a person wants to have more power, and power equates to energy, so your get up and go, equates to intelligence, it equates to your heart space, your ability to connect with others and feel that, if anyone has tapped that incredible wellspring of heart-centered love, that's, just a sort of a beaming light rod out of the heart, that it's inexplicable. It's for no apparent reason. You just feel it. It's not because you've been whisked away to a private island and, posed to on one knee, with a 5-carat diamond ring. It has nothing to do with that. It's just this this human connection that's like the deepest, most beautiful feeling in the world. That's all what we should feel. But these substances will prevent that from happening because they're filled with this dissonance. So when we talk about chaos and disorder, another term for that is dissonance. And if we have that kind of dissonance, what's actually happening on a cellular level is that the body is losing its connectivity as well. So it's not able to be of sort of a useful to each other. Nothing's in sync. It's like when we separate. I put this when we behave with separation consciousness, everything in us and with us is also doing that, which creates a disintegration. So dissonance leads to disintegration. Integrity is a knitting of the threads of life. It's bringing it together. And the dissonance is creating disintegration. So what we see as cosmetic aging is actually dissonance and disintegration. It's entropy. Entropy is basically the coming apart of things. It's the decay cycle. So if we're going to engage with those substances, the M&Ms, the movie popcorn, the microwave foods, all of it, anything that's doesn't come from the earth, isn't raised by the sun and soil, basically without pesticides, we're going to, it's going to be contributing to our disintegration. So by approaching things from the outside and approaching the cosmetic externally, it's missing what's happening. What's very important for people, if they want to grow in consciousness, they need to recognize how important it is to see what's happening in the unseen realms. So we can't see disintegration on an energetic level unless somebody who's listening to this has that ability, which some people do have, to see the energetic fields. But if we're seeing disintegration on the cosmetic field, on the sort of at face value, but naked eye, then what we need to know is we need to read behind the appearances. So behind the appearance, we have to know that means there's disintegration, there's dissonance, there's separation consciousness. So all that we see in our modern world is this rapid degeneration that everyone's trying so quickly to try and plug in the facial injections and the Botox and all this stuff. They're trying to Band-Aid dissonance. And if instead they could just bring about the integrity and a higher order and connectivity, then the cosmetic will also reflect that. And then what you'll see when you see somebody who lives that way, and you see people who, and I'll stop in a second, but you'll see people age, and their lines and their aging has this uplifting look to it. They've lived and they've been exposed to the elements, and had life has happened to them, but it's happened in an upward direction, versus those people who, as they age, everything's down. It's like down to the grave. It's they've been beaten down. So the energy actually, just like in Masaru Emoto's Messages in Water, energy takes shape, and the beautiful crystallized patterns that come about from exposure to thoughts of love and joy and connectivity are totally different to those that, the drops of water that are exposed to hate and anger and fear and all that. And it's the same thing with so we can really start to read behind the appearances and know that we can rectify anything, set anything, even if it's already a lot of damage is done. We can still, if you're still alive and kicking, you can still reverse that just by transforming that. And it's hard, if you don't have the support, it's hard. If you have great support, then it's usually not too bad. It still takes a lot of discipline. And people are so afraid of discipline. No, they said, you go and eat what you want. Your body will tell you what you want. No, it won't. Your body will tell you what the pathogens want. So there's, sorry, I'm going to go off on tangents, so I better just stop.
No, it's okay. The only problem with the tangents is I get like 5 questions that I want to ask, and then I get so excited that I can't get to all of them. So I love the tangents. And I love that you were talking about seeing beyond the appearances, because back to the normal versus natural conversation, we're sort of taught that, well, sagging skin and these symptoms coming up and these ways that we age, well, this is normal. You better just get used to it. So of course people are putting in fillers because they're just trying to sort of combat what's going to happen anyways. And so for us to be able to step back and realize this isn't normal, or this isn't natural. This isn't what has to be. This is just sort of what has become normal, or what we see as normal. And the phrase, I think that for you, I have stolen, and I know that you've taken it from another teacher and used over and over again, is this idea that pain is a call for change. So that when we see symptoms, or when we see an outer manifestation of something that is painful, there's something so much deeper going on. It's not something to band-aid or to cover up. So could you expound on this phrase, this pain is a call for change, as far as, because for me, like when you were saying, like, no, the body is not going to tell you what it wants. So I have varying thoughts on that. And I think it's going to work differently for different people. For me, sort of going into the intuitive eating thing was really helpful, but I had to do it from a really embodied place. And I came back to a lot of the cleansing principles very intuitively by being in my body, because I was taking in these things that were created in separation consciousness and really feeling like I was still unblocking my body, removing the waste from my body. So it was becoming even more clear at that point, right, that these things were not serving me, were blocking me, were numbing me, were keeping me from feeling like myself, were creating symptoms, etc. So for me, the intuitive eating perspective worked because I was cleansing and unblocking and being embodied in all of these things. So scrolling all the way back to this idea of listening to the body, learning to listen to pain and pleasure, and pain being a call for change. Do you have further thoughts on that?
Sure. Okay. So, and that originally came from Almin, just to answer that.
Yes, who is amazing.
So, pain is a call for change. So basically, that and that statement is meant to cover everything. So where there's pain in your relationship, where there's emotional pain on every level. So, and it can be subtle and it can be immense. It can, really run the gamut, the whole spectrum. But if we can, here's the way I like to think of it. There's a language to life. There's a communication in life, and life communicates through pleasure and through pain. So we get these these indications when we do something. So any action we take, any thought we think, any kind of line of thinking, any sort of system we take on, it will either result in a certain degree of pleasure or a certain degree of pain. And when I'm talking about pleasure, it's really important to understand that I'm talking about an eternal pleasure. I'm not talking about an ephemeral pleasure. So, the body is not getting, it's not communicating with you, and you're having a big slice of chocolate cake and you're having pleasure. Oh, that must mean it's really good for me. So that's not what I mean. I mean the pleasure of having greater ease and connectivity and natural joy and that state of being. So that's what pleasure is. So if we do things that, so to go back to this, the nature of having this conversation with us, it's the way nature is showing us at any given moment what is good for us and what isn't good for us by communicating through pleasure and pain. And so if we get symptoms, nature's saying, this actually isn't working for you. So take a look at it. So whenever you have pain, wherever you have pain, you want to say, okay, so what about this could be damaging me, and how can I fix it? Am I ready to make a change in a direction that will generate less pain, less of that symptom? You might not eradicate the thing at the time. You might just have less of it, or you might, if you're glutton for punishment with a certain person, and you might still be a little bit, but you're a lot less so. You become conscious of it. So wherever, and what I mean is like wherever it's coming up in your life that you're feeling pain, whether it's in a relationship or whether it's something you're eating or something you're engaging in. Maybe you're not, you're staying up too late. It could be something as simple as that. And you wake up feeling groggy. That's pain. That's a degree of pain. That's somewhere on the spectrum of not feeling well. So it's not pleasure. It's not working for you. So let's look at that. Let's change it. But we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be ready to see, willing to see, and then we have to be willing to put in some effort. And when we do, we'll see that we can rectify these things, but they're not easy. And again, we're living in a culture that sort of celebrates anything that, is that comes easily. That's a short-term reward. That's immediate gratification. So we have to rise above that, because that message of the path of least resistance and the immediate gratification is really a fast track to unraveling yourself. You've got to work hard.
Yeah, that's where people can get confused too with, following pleasure, but pleasure needs to be this very big picture thing. Like you said, this natural state of joy and ease and flow. Like that's the pleasure we're looking for. That's how this works. And yeah, like absolutely it requires effort, but it's not like this white knuckling hard discipline. It's really stepping back and being disciplined enough to see like, oh, this is causing me pain. Oh, this pleasure is here, but it is temporary. Like you said, the chocolate cake, it feels lovely in the moment, but how do you feel later? How does this accumulate? How does this impact your overall life experience? So it's pulling up and out and seeing the big picture. And that's a big part of the discipline. So thank you for that. One final question, and then I want to hear about what you're doing now and what you're offering now. I always tie up the podcast with this question. The name of the podcast is Free Spirit Academy. And how I define a free spirit is basically you when you get to be fully yourself, like no blocks, nothing in the way, just the pure expression of you. How would you define that for yourself, free spiritedness?
Mm-hmm. When I think about that, I think immediately. Now, you were in the Life of Power.
I was, course. Yeah. I would love to hear you talk about that too.
Okay, I'm just bringing it up because remember when I showed you guys the tarot card of the devil?
Yes.
Okay, so and basically, to me, it means to not be chained. So if anyone has a deck of tarot cards or wants to look this up. I forget what number of tarot card deck it is, but if you just look up the devil card in tarot, it's this beastly sort of mammoth beast sitting on a throne with two people, a man and a woman, at his feet, and they have chains on them. And the opposite of this card in the tarot deck is the Lover's card. And in the Lover's card, you have the same two people, but there are no chains. And the idea is that whenever the devil just represents something that sucks us up, it takes us away from life, and it keeps us enslaved. So it's a kind of enslavement. So when you talk about being a free spirit, I think automatically about not being chained and having a sense of sovereignty. Mm-hmm. So if we have addictions that are running our lives, and they're that's keeping us from being a free spirit, and that's creating more of like a sandbag. So sandbags and chains, anything that keeps us too earthbound. See, we really should be living in this world where we're in a body, but we're also super connected with spirit. Mm-hmm. And so we're sort of living in almost an in-between place with access to both. So we can go deeper into the physical, and we can go, we can sort of diffuse even more into the spirit and connect more with spirit at will. So if we're too heavily weighted in either one of those places, then we're basically not free spirits. We're enchained to the earth, for example. So anything so I believe that to be a free spirit is to be free of addictions, to be sovereign, to have that unobstructed flow of electromagnetic energy flowing through us, so that we are as inspired and creative and able to connect with each other as possible. Because when we're in that state, we're also selfless. And it's that state of, I don't mean that we need to go be like Mother Teresa's. That's not what I mean by selfless. What I mean by selfless is that we're not, our eyes aren't constantly looking inward. They're able to look out. We're able to be in our body, but not so hyper polarized in our body that we are too much about ourselves. It's great to be, and this is going to sound kind of maybe a bit wacky, but just bear with me, to be in yourself, to be settled in your body, but to be so aware and attentive to the outside world. Because if we're too heavily, polarized into our bodies, we're not going to have this ability to connect with other people. We'll be more inclined to measure ourselves and compare and be jealous and be always just, this is measuring. And that's really debilitating because most people live in a world of constantly reflecting back on how they measure up in life. And we want to get beyond that. To be beyond that is to really be a free spirit, because then you're not worrying about what people think. You're doing what you know is right. You're feeling connected to everything. And you're just, and you're not doing things because of addictions.
Beautiful. Yes. And just quick referencing back to the electromagnetic flow running through the body, is this also, would you compare that to what you describe as primal power? And then could you talk about your Year of Power program? And is that something that people can still access?
Okay. So yes, the electromagnetic energy is the primal power, is the life force, is source energy. So it's basically it's pure life. And I explain all of this in the Life of Power, hopefully more articulately than I have just, but it's one and the same. And the closer the more we embody that, the freer we are, the more switched on we are, all the things that make humans great. We have more of that, let's say, and make living great. So when people say, what do you mean you want to live forever? Like, well, I'm not surprised you don't want to live forever, but
right.
there's a way of feeling that where you actually, we don't know what the, what the capacity is for everything. We don't know what the, what's the word, what our capabilities are. I think we're we have not yet tapped even a little bit of what we're capable of. But so yes, the Life of Power course is a year-long course of study that is going to be offered again in a couple of weeks for 2018, and it's my favorite course so far. I've been so thrilled to teach it, and it's the most profound course I think to date, I'd like to think. And so that will be available in a couple of weeks, and then I'm also hosting a retreat here in South Africa, in Cape Town, at my home, which is going to take place the last week of April. And it's filling up, but I'm sure we can fit people in if they hear this and they're interested in coming. It will be it's 5 days with me, and in this this beautiful, beautiful place that has so much to offer. And we're going to be doing just going very, very deep into primal power and the lifestyle, and it'll be a total life shift for anybody who comes out and wants to do it.
Amazing. And obviously all of your books, and the reason why I didn't ask about any of the specific dietary, how do we actually cleanse the body, is because I want to say, for anybody who this conversation sparked something in you, even if you have no idea what it is, because I will say that I didn't, right? Like when I picked up this diet book years ago, something was sparked in me, and a lot of the teachings that Natalia has presented, just like something in me just kept pulling me along, even though I didn't quite get it. So if something in you has sparked, the books, the nitty-gritty information are all available, and they're all amazing. So definitely go check those out. The links to everything will be in the show notes. And are you still at Detox the World, or is it the Natalia Rose Institute for your website?
The detoxtheworld.com is the website, and it's just called the Natalia Rose Institute. But detoxtheworld.com is the place to go.
Great. And so the Life of Power, the books, is there anything else that we should know about?
No, I think that pretty much covers it. I mean, the website, the books, the Life of Power, the retreat. I mean, there's always so much happening. But I would say is follow me on Instagram, because that's
yeah,
where really,
you're back out in the social media world.
Yeah, I finally kind of got with the times.
Yeah, it's fantastic. No, it's so great to see what's going on your Instagram every day. So yes, that and Facebook, and that sounds great. Thank you so much. What a seriously inspiring conversation. I really appreciate this.
It's an absolute joy and privilege to be with you, Randy. And thank you so much for having me.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for listening to this conversation. Before I wrap things up, I want to invite you to come join the private Free Spirit Academy Facebook group, where I post videos, offer support, and answer questions on all things food and body freedom. And you'll also get a free copy of my ebook, The Eat to Feel Good Diet. I hope to see you there.